Okay, so this second session, we will look at interfaith relations in Indonesia as a context or a background of the whole workshop. So the workshop is on interfaith mediation, and we will see our context first. And we will do it in two ways. I will start with a hopefully short presentation, and then I'll ask you to complete the picture. So I will give just a broad picture of the interfaith relations in Indonesia, and then you can, I will divide you into 5 groups, have discussion within groups, and then after the break, you will have time, probably not very much, 5 to 10 minutes for each group to present your conclusions from the groups. Yeah. So the purpose is to update us, all of us, but also at the same time to update Imam and Pastor who will be with us until Friday about the situation here. So I will go quickly. Again, I don't have pretension to give a comprehensive picture, but just an overall map. So the title is Interfaith Relations in Indonesia, Mapping and Patterns. So it's a global map. Again, I'd like you later to complete the picture. Fini. Yeah, so when we speak about interfaith relations, yeah, one of the, am I standing, am I covering, you're okay? Yes. You can see either, yeah, okay. So, yeah, okay. So what are the indicators? When we think about interfaith relations, maybe it's too broad a title. So I was thinking we can look at several things, and not all of them we have enough data. First, we can look at religious conflicts or religious identity-based conflict. And then I will show you later another language we have to explain, to portray interfaith relation is the language of religious freedom or violation of religious freedom. That's a new language actually. And then we can also speak about interfaith dialogue, which is happening in Indonesia for a long time. But there are also things which we may not know much or not research well, not written a lot, on everyday interfaith relations, which is also important. So yeah, next. So I will use some of these indicators to look at the mapping of interfaith relation. So the general context or the general trend, we can divide in a simple way before and after 1998, which I think shows very distinctive patterns. In pre-1998 democratization, we see tight control by the government for the sake of stability, harmony. These are two important terms before 1998. Through two things actually, regulations of religions, many regulations of religions, regulations of building houses of worship, regulations in proselytization, in religious education, and but also at the same time there are attempts to create dialogue, state-sponsored. So I remember one article written by, I don't exactly remember, but it's in the book on Pak Johan Effendi. Pak Johan Effendi, he worked at the Ministry of Religious Affairs during the time of Pak Mukti Ali. So it's early 1970s. And for him, there are two ways to manage religious diversity in Indonesia. He said it's either through regulation or through dialogue. And for him, during the time of Mukti Ali, he attempted to do dialogue, and he started actually several types of dialogue. But at the time after Mukti Ali, there are, and the Ministry of Religious Affairs after Mukti Ali was Alam Shah, who was general, who was ex-military general. So he was the Minister of Religious Affairs, and he attempted management of religious diversity more through regulations. So it's good to remember that there are two ways the government can do this: regulation or dialogue. And not much little societal initiative. The first interfaith NGO, the first interfaith organization, was established in Yogyakarta. That's in late 1980s, 1989. 1991. Okay, so, but Wiwin just came, so you were not here in the first session. Yeah. So she's she's part of Interfaith Day in Jogja. That was the first societal initiative at Interfaith Dialogue, 1991. Okay, next. So after Reformasi, 1998, the democratization, there are many actually positive developments. Greater constitutional and legal guarantee for religious freedom. We have one whole new chapter in our new constitution, in the amended constitution, with the title Human Rights, and several articles there explicitly mentions religious freedom. Although if we want to discuss it further, there are also some qualifications, but in general I think this is well accepted that there were greater constitutional and legal guarantee for religious freedom. But also now the state had weakened, society became stronger, so less restriction in general by the government, but more social hostilities or intergroup pressures or hostilities. So the freedom, the space opened up by freedom was also filled in by many groups which could not exist before 1998, some of the hardliner groups. And then also what we saw, the revival of identities, ethnic identity, religious identity, regional identity, adat identity, which are used as the basis for demands for justice, for recognition, redistribution, and this goes together with the decentralization. Indonesia was very much centralized before 1998, but now suddenly it was so decentralized. The result was that there are so many new local laws. And also what is very important, I think, is to mention that now we have more than 500 districts and provinces. How many provinces do we have? 34. Okay, I just checked because it changed. When I was in elementary school until I was in high school, it was always the same, 27. And now suddenly it's adding, and now it's 34. And districts, provinces and districts, there are more than 500, and each of them have elections. So previously, like governor was elected from the central government, now they have these local elections and more than 500 elections, direct elections. And we have seen that it was a particular source of conflicts, mobilization, etc. There are many studies about that. So I think we have to mention this particularly, election, as one of the sources of conflict. Next, please. So there are some statements or claims about what happens nowadays. many terms used, like for example, that there is more Islamization of public life, whether that's through law, that's through not only law, but also in daily interaction. Like for example, renting a house, and then the owner would look at where are you come from, what is your ethnic, what is your religion. So that's becoming, I mean, we have more and more stories about that. So in Malaysia last month there was a big issue about laundry only for Muslims. I don't know if there's Muslim only laundry here, but we have COS or dormitory, for example, only for Muslim, and others that has been discussed also here. Laundry washing. Yeah, so like laundry shop. Yeah, and then they select only for Muslims or yeah. Yeah, but that's not in Indonesia. I mentioned that in Malaysia. That was a controversy last month. But actually, and also many studies, surveys, and others says that there are rising intolerance, etc. There are numbers produced, percentage, etc. Personally, I don't like very much the numbers because. Yeah, for many reasons, and I think we have also to acknowledge we have to make a more nuanced assessment. Not everything goes worse. Actually, many things also get better. If we compare, for example, with before 1998. For example, there are also more society-based initiatives for pluralism. We have seen proliferation of civil societies, amazing in Indonesia, against intolerance. And also, as I mentioned earlier, some laws are actually better compared to 1998, although there are also some regulations which are becoming more restrictive. So in general, probably it's not very easy to say that, well, to be very pessimistic or optimistic. There are different factors working in different directions. Yeah. Okay, next. Yeah, so some of the indicators that I will use, at least two I will use. I will look at religious identity-based conflicts in which we have more or less good data. And actually the data shows a good development. And also later looking at another indicator which is violation of religious freedom. Okay, next. So I want to show, basically I just take from nice documents written in 2014 with very good data. It's the title is How Large Conflicts Subside, Evidence from Indonesia, which basically it starts with the I mean, wonder maybe. Sometimes we worry very much. There are so much conflict around Indonesia. But what the data shows is that many of the large conflicts, they actually are resolved. And this is an achievement which is, I mean, not easy to find comparisons with other places. Well, we can compare later probably with Nigeria, but let's see. I mean, the general one of the main conclusion is that large communal conflicts erupted around 1998, many of them. But then after 2004, 2005, actually until now, if you look really closely, we don't have large conflicts. What is large conflict? I will give some examples. Next. There are some tables, so we can get picture closely. This is probably very small, but if you're interested, you can download the PDF free. But if you look at this, this is, I will just read it. violence by type in 8 Indonesian provinces, 1998 to 2003. So you see that the proportion of all violence-related death, this is one indicator to see the magnitude of the conflict. Actually, the largest proportion, this is 1998 to 2003, is separatist type of violence. The ethno-communal conflicts, which accounts for almost half of all conflicts. Violence from 1998 to 2003. And under ethno-communal, it's divided into inter-religious, inter-ethnic, and others. The total is 45%. And then the separatist is the second, 36% of all violence-related death. So this is counting the number of deaths. And you have the numbers here. Like, for example, the inter-religious, 6,500, inter-ethnic, 2,158, and others. Again, using this number, we can make comparison with other places. Nigeria, for example. I don't know how many, the number of deaths, but we can see, we can compare the death. Next, please. And this is the trend from 1998 to 2009. And you can see there's a big eruption here after 1998, after the transition to democracy. But then after 2004, it's gone. It becomes very low. This one in the middle, this is only for Aceh because it has special context. But this is general in Indonesia. This is the decline of violence-related death in Indonesia. Again, this is the indicator of the magnitude of the conflict. Next, please. And this is the composition of post-conflict violence in high-conflict provinces. So one of the findings, which I will read after this, is that after the large communal conflicts are done, there is a trend that in post-conflict areas, there are more conflicts. So there are more conflicts in post-conflict areas. And this is, again, the large one is the ethno-communal. And then it's important to see ethno-communal and then resource-based conflict sumber daya alam. And then vigilante. Vigilante, that includes brawls, tawuran. Tawuran actually accounts for really high number. We have an expert. Yeah, thieves. Main hakim sendiri terhadap pencuri. That accounts for really high number. Siswa is doing research on that, so with Sana. So he's an expert in this room on vigilante, but not the actor of vigilante. Next, please. He's facilitator of conflict, of vigilante. Okay. Okay, these are some of the findings. I'll just read quickly. No more large conflicts since 2004, yet more smaller conflicts in post-conflict areas. Security intervention by the state is sufficiently effective. This is again for large communal conflicts. Okay, effective to contain conflicts, although it did not target the main sources of conflict. And then this is also very interesting. There are 3 ways of resolution of conflicts in all this. First, by agreement, like for example in Aceh, Ambon, Poso, making social pacts or formal peace declaration. In Aceh, it was also facilitated by international agencies, etc. And then, or the second one, victory of one side over the other. So if there's one group wins, and then the conflict is done. That's in West and East Kalimantan. I think this includes in Sampit. And what else? Sampit. And then there are some conflicts which ended, although there are no resolution. Probably the parties just get tired, and then they stop. And that also important. I mean, that's one way to finish conflict. That's in North Maluku. But if you see these three ways of resolution of conflicts, actually many of them, they are not resolved satisfactorily. The third conclusion, it says that the interventions by the state is effective, but it did not address the main source of conflict. Okay, next. And it's also important to look at government responses. Probably not all of us know, but in 2012 there is a new law on conflict management. It mentions that one of the sources of conflict is identity-based conflict. And it's very interesting that under Kemenko PMK, under the Ministry of Social Affairs, Social Welfare, Human Development, something like that, there are 22 special directorates created to deal with conflicts. So 22 directorates, and they don't work with each other, I think, in general. So effective or not, we don't know, but I mean there are attempts to deal with it. And then there is the National System for Monitoring Violence, which is now also not very clear, right? We have, we have the, and I think part of the research before, that also makes use of this National System for Monitoring Violence. If you don't know about this Sistem Nasional Pemantauan Kekerasan, you can check it in the website. It's open. It has clippings from media and others. Next. So the other type of conflicts. So the finding mentions that after 2004, large communal conflicts in general is over. But after 2005, we see more smaller conflicts. Smaller, usually it's measured by, like, for example, the number of deaths. So, and we have good data on that because since 2008, there are several surveys and reports on religious freedom, which looks at violations of religious freedom. So this is a new language, actually, religious freedom. We can claim we have religious freedom since 1945, etc., but as a language to call, to name conflicts, for example, or as a basis for advocacy, this is quite new. I think advocacy based on the idea of rights to religious freedom, that only started around 2005. So we are actually relatively new. But we have more data from there. So small identity-based conflicts took place more frequently and spread to more areas, although the magnitude is much smaller. Actually, some people in this room is the victim of this type of conflicts. Ex-pendeta, not ex. For example, ada yang dari Ahmadiyah juga, survivor turned into activist, are in this room. Firdaus is Ahmadiyah. Pak Palti from, his church was forced to close, and he was brought to the police, etc., and then that made him into a student of theology at UKDW. Probably it's also good to mention that Firdaus and Pak Palti created an organization called Sobat KBB, Solidaritas Korban Tindak pelanggaran KBB. So it's a group among victims or survivors of violations of religious freedom, which include, like for example, against the Ahmadiyya churches, etc. So they have these groups. Two of them at least are here. I don't know if there are others, but at least two of them, the main figures are here. So two main issues, interreligious. Many of the conflicts, it's related to houses of worship, mostly churches, but also other houses of worship, including mosque, in some Muslim minority areas, Buddhist, Hindu, etc. They are relatively small compared to the large communal conflicts which consume thousands of deaths. Relatively very small number of deaths. Like for example, in with the case of Ahmadiyya, I think so far probably 2 or 3 deaths, right? Well, of course it's big. I mean, it's human life. But again, if we use the number of deaths as a measurement, it's relatively small. In Shia, community of Shia in Sampang, 1 person died, but more than 100 people were forced to leave their village, and they have been leaving their village for 5 years now. And then Gavatar is like, well, some people call it as new religious movement. 5,000 of them were forced to relocate from Kalimantan. No death, but the leader was imprisoned. They were charged by defamation of religion law. Okay, next. So government responses. We were lucky before. We have good research to map the responses, but it's difficult to find a pattern. But if we have to name one pattern, is that inconsistent, which means in some places state apparatus work well. In other places they don't work at all. In still other places they are part of the problem. So police, for example, Pusat has great research on policing conflict, and it shows places where the police works effectively, but also places where they don't work or they become source of problem. And then, yeah, I mentioned earlier, there are better constitutional foundation for religious freedom, but there are also, because of decentralization, discriminative local regulation, and actually some regulations, especially regulations which regulate small religious unorthodox groups, they become source of intolerance. And then we should not forget that there are, although the number is very small, some indigenous religions or local religious groups. Actually, in general, they get better treatment in the past decade. If you compare it with before 1998, one example, Sunda Wiwitan, for example. If you look at the history, since the time of the Dutch colonial policy, they were always marginalized. Now they can assert their identity. There are some discrimination, but there are also ways they know how to fight for their rights. So there are avenues opened up to get more recognition. In education, for example, there are new regulation which works for them, but on other things they are still discriminated. So in general, this is probably not very helpful, but the best we can say is that it's inconsistent. The pattern is inconsistent. Next. Yeah, and this is important. We talk about state responses, but there are also non-governmental responses. I mentioned this to remind us, you can complete the picture later. There was, Pastor James, you asked about the Interreligious Forum. So this is the name, the Interreligious Harmony Forum, FKUB. It was, I call it as semi-government sponsored because it gets funding from the government, not much, but it's supposed to be initiative from the grassroots. So yeah, semi-government sponsored. And it exists in all provinces and districts. And again, there are more than 500 of them. So in some research, again, there's inconsistency. In some places, they work well, they solve problems. In other places, they become the source of problems. So they have, for example, the authority of giving recommendation for building of houses of worship. If you want to build house of worship, you need to get license, and the FKUB needs to give recommendation. And then we have more independent bodies after 1998 also. Komnas HAM, it existed before 1998, but after 1998 it was strengthened. And then Komnas Perempuan was established in 1998, right? A few months. Huh? Komnas Perempuan, National Commission Against Violence on Women. Both of them, actually, they are very active. They are well regarded in general by the government, although most of the recommendations are not obeyed by the government, and there's no way to make sure that the recommendations were followed up by the government. But they are there. They do their part. And then this is what is very important, and I think this is one key that Indonesia is still around today, the civil society initiatives. There are so many interfaith dialogue and engagements of many types. Well, the people who are around in this room represents many groups, organizations, which pay attention to interfaith, better interfaith relations, whether using the term dialogue or not. And then there are more human rights organizations, more attentions on human rights organization. And I think yesterday I just got from, I don't know, Siswa or Ishad or Husni, who sent an article about a survey about how Indonesians look at human rights organizations. And in general, Indonesia, India, I think 4 countries. In Indonesia, it's among the best one. I think, people look at the activities of human rights organizations in very positive way. They have hopes for the human rights organizations. So they are around. And then also very important religious organizations. We know there's Nahdlatul Ulama in Islam. There is Muhammadiyah, the 2 largest Muslim organizations. But there are also, of course, Christian organizations, including PGI. PGI and then KWI, Walubi, they have interfaith wing or division, so they pay attention to this issue. Not all of them are as active, but they do many works, and I think that's a very important source of very important resource for peace. Next. Oh yeah, I have to mention, this is the last slide. Very important things which I think we should also remember in your discussion also, and this has been discussed in many research, the importance of the role of adat, for example, adat mechanism, local culture. In the law on conflict management, actually adat ways of conflict resolution is mentioned very centrally, that the first avenue which has to be done is you use local resources for conflict resolution. If it doesn't work, then you go to other avenues, including those sponsored by the government. But adat is getting more recognition. And then if you read the book in front of you, which was published. There are some stories about the importance of collective memories. We have that in some places. When we did the movie screening last week, some of the audience, they mentioned they have memories of harmony in the past, for example. That's important. That's an important source also. And then in the case book, she mentions here, I think the term is everyday reconciliation, right? Things which may not be captured well in research and others, but it's important, the everyday interactions, and we should not forget about that. Oh, in Stella's chapter. Okay, I haven't reached that chapter. Yeah, I will do it tonight. So Stella also has one chapter in that book. I'm done here. Sorry I have to rush, but it's already more than what I planned. But the next, this is again broad picture. Now I want to divide you, Devida et Impera, into 5 groups, and you have okay, probably 5-10 minutes. Okay, quick one. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Zain. My name is Immanuel, and in general, we can see that the situation in Indonesia is getting better. Like we can see from the PEW or Pew Research Center has released data that said in 2007 to 2013, Indonesia has been considered as very high hostilities, including like religious-based conflict. But then the situation is getting better, and also from the International Peace Index, also now Indonesian ranking is higher than before. It means that the situation. Peace Index. Yeah, Vision of Humanity. Yeah, that's one. And my question is, maybe you have considered this or think about this before, is what actually the factor that drives that? Is that from the government regulations that guarantee better about the religious freedom, or also maybe from the government sponsored or the society initiative itself that also work more so that the situation now we can see it's better than before? Yeah, thank you.
Good questions with no clear answer. I think probably the safest answer is combinations of all of them. But yeah, like I said, probably we need to be more specific when we come to that. I mean, in different places, probably we have different factors. But I think in general, we can always mention civil society initiative. That's very important. Many of us probably are complaining, pessimistic, etc. But don't forget, we make change. I'm including myself there. But yeah, I mean, in some sectors, actually, the situation is getting better, and probably it's difficult to exactly pinpoint whether we do well or not. The Pak Ihsan's question last night about criteria of success, for example, that's important. So we know when we do good, we know when we don't do good, but we should not always have too idealistic expectation maybe, which makes us become too pessimistic because we never get to the ideal. But well, I should stop. I don't know the answer. Yeah, not yet.
Yeah. Actually, I just want to I don't know, add or question, but I think part of the non-government response is through to the interfaith issues is also academician. You know, I mean the ICRS and CRCS, yeah, it's part of this initiative. I mean, you know, especially CRCS, you have a sekolah apa namanya? pengelolaan SKP ya, and SPK, sorry, SPK, and then ICRS, they have a lot of interfaith programs for youth and etc. So I think in this term, you need to also mention this in yours. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make correction and mention myself there.
Thank you, Pak Jen. Just a little bit questions. You mentioned about the situation is getting better. Probably it's, yeah, I think also, I believe it's true in terms of like the decreasing physical violence. But in terms of other violence, let's say, you know, the situation's becoming more segregated, more polarized. What do you think about it? Some people complain that, you know, now situation is far different from the past. You know, people become more, become their own, you know, stick with their own groups, segregated, polarized, something like that, and lack of, you know, religious or cultural understanding, something like that. Yeah.
Well, I think the tables, for example, which I showed, it's until 2000. One of them is until 2009. One data, the other until 2012. So it doesn't explain the whole thing until today. And also, probably it's changing, but I mean, as far as the data is concerned, that is what we get. And also, what you mentioned, probably it's not always easy to measure that, like segregation and others. So we need to. But yeah, I mean, when I say I didn't say actually the situation gets better. I mean, but the conflicts, for example, it went down. We have to admit that. I mean, like the large communal conflicts, we haven't seen that for 10 years, maybe. But yeah, I mean, there are probably, I mean, to get comprehensive picture, yeah, that's not easy. So, but yeah, probably that's not uniform picture in all areas or all fields. So it's still ambiguous.
If I'm not wrong, you told that the civil society initiative, one of the response of this kind of condition, you told that this is the good thing that keep our country from these issues. But I want to ask how strong that initiative or civil society initiative to solve all these issues. Maybe Bu Wiwin had told that the good response come from the academic. But how about the grassroots, the people, the lay people who don't know about the political narrative? I think that it's not hard to see that the politicization of religion or the influences of religious leaders intrigue them to do verbal violate maybe, or yes, something like that. How do you think about it?
Well, again, not easy to answer, but yeah, I think. Well, I mean, if you several people since last night have mentioned late 2016 from October, November, Jakarta election that changed the situation. But yeah, we're still looking at how that unfolds. I mean, like, is that an election thing, or does that change the dynamic in longer term? We don't know. I mean, there are already, just last month, Ma'arif Journal has published 2 editions on Pasca Aksi Bela Islam. And it gets also mixed assessment. There is still a question whether this is a sustainable, the changes around the Jakarta election, whether that's long-term or is it short-term. Actually, in the past few months, we have already seen going up and down. HTI was banned. That's good news or bad news, I don't know. People will see it in different ways. Well, that's Indonesia. I don't know. I'm sorry, I cannot answer that.
from my experience that I think the problem is that the first that I know that we are here, we trying to make a dent in the peaceful building in Indonesia, but the problem is that we just scratch the surface. I mean, if you talk about the religious conflict, so the most group that have the most resource is the religion institution itself. They have resource to make conflict. They also have resource to make peace. They own all the resource. They own the people. They own the ideology. They own the network. So the problem is that, from my experience, that almost every religious institution in Indonesia is they live in their own ghetto. They just care about their own self, and it doesn't mean bad. I mean, it also doesn't mean that religious institution in Indonesia is bad, that they want war or something. No. They quit good. But the problem that they also not trying hard to make peace. So in simple term, it's easier to mobilize the religious institution to make conflict than to mobilize them to make peace. So let's say that right now, like, I'm from Ahmadiyya party, from HKBB, and we don't have a problem. Our institution doesn't have a problem. But after what we have tried for 3 years until now, we still cannot bring our leader to sit down together just to make lunch together. They don't want it. They just care about themselves. So then it's easier to make conflict than to make peace, because the resource is there, and it's easier for people to mobilize them to make conflict than to mobilize them to make peace. So right now the peace initiative, we still rely on like what we call like NGO or person, social movement, but religious institution itself, they stand still. They just there. They until now they doesn't take significant action.
Well, probably I'll use this opportunity to ask probably Pak Faltian and Mas Firdaus. Do you think that Sobat KBB has achieved something at least?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's not all bad news.
Not all bad news. That
Okay.
I said it's really just a surface. We just scratch the surface. But the deeper, the most resource that we have, we still cannot mobilize that for peace.
Okay. Well, I asked that question because I see the tendency of us underestimate ourselves. So probably you have done something, but I don't want to go further just to provoke you. Probably you underestimate yourself. But I have to stop here. We need to have some time to have more meaningful group discussion. So we had discussions of how to divide the groups. And probably the easiest way, it's probably a bit random, but we'll make groups based on region. Sumatra, how many people are from Sumatra? 1, 2, 3. Are you Sumatra or Jogja? Simbolon. Okay. No, you are Bekasi. Kalimantan, how many? Okay, so we'll make a group of 5 people from Kalimantan and Sumatra. So 1, 2, 3. Where's other Sumatra? 4, 5. Okay. 5, go. Yeah. Jawa, Western Java. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6. You are in the second group. East Java and Central Java. No? Jogja. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Jogja. 1, 2, 3. Other from East Java? No? Okay, 5. Yeah. Okay, so 5. This is the third group. Sulawesi. Makassar, Manado, Poso. 1, 2. Plus Ambon. 3. Plus Kupang. 4. Papua. 5. Okay, one group. So we have 4 groups. The 5th group, please remember your group, okay? So who else don't get the group? West Nusa Tenggara, I think you go with that, with the, yeah, the last group. So, yeah, and then how many others who don't get the group? Jakarta. Special region. How many? Jakarta? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, one group. So everyone gets the group, right? So we have 6 groups, do we? Sorry, 5. Yeah. So anyone who doesn't get the group? So everyone knows the group. Okay. Take your time. Oh yeah, these are the questions in general. What kinds of actual or potential conflicts between religious communities in your region, or field? What I mean by field is field of work. It can be like media or education. Yeah, I mean these different sectors. So you can look within each region whether there are particular issues on education, media, or others. So you can focus on your own field. And what are the issues? Second, what potential sources of peacemaking or peace building you see in your region or field? Whether it's within the state, I mean local state initiative, for example, or in society. And third, do you find a place for interfaith mediation? This is our topic, interfaith mediation. So do you think interfaith mediation will work in your region or field? If you have not had a good idea about what interfaith mediation, no problem. Just, yeah, interfaith mediation. You understand it in your ways. We'll learn more about that in the next 2 days. And what are the most important challenges? Is it clear? 3 questions. Please, each group appoint 1 representative to do the presentation after the break, after the lunch break. Clear? So everyone is clear also about the groups? Yeah, okay. Go. You can find your place everywhere, anywhere around. Yes, I will provide you with what is it? Kertas apa namanya? Plano. I will give each group kertas plano, and then you can write down there.